Greetings everyone, here's another delightful video from me to you. This time I'm going to finally get around to doing the video about Candela Obscura from Darrington Press and Critical Role. It MSRPs for $39.99. However, on Amazon you'll typically find it in the 40s range. Now, there has been several reviews and overviews of this book so far, and many of them are ranging from okay to very negative. I'm going to try to focus on some key details of it. First and foremost, it's a fairly nice quality book overall. It is stitch bound, comes with a nice ribbon, a cheap ribbon, but the vast majority of ribbons in books these days are the cheap ribbons, not premium ribbons. Cheap ribbons are essentially now premium ribbons just to the existence of having a ribbon. A premium ribbon would have been braided on the end in multiple times back and forth. Would be either like a braid, or it'd have multiple cross sections with a little nib that would actually protect the end from unraveling. See my Call of Cthulhu video for the investigator's handbook or the keeper's guide, because I actually had a situation where one of the strings came loose and I grabbed it and I pulled it and it just unraveled in rapid succession. It has a black, gold, and green theme motif. By the way of note, I'm going to grab a Vesson and put it here. And then there's those pesky orcs from Justin Lanassa. And the reason why I have it sitting up there is because there's going to be a really interesting string comparison contrast between that and this and that and this. So, this is the core rulebook for Candela Obscura, which is a part of the Illuminated Worlds system. Which is kind of interesting that the core system was not released first. A variant of that core system was released. Interesting choice. Overall, what I can say is that I do like the gold, black, and green coloring motif overall in the book. The only issue is that green is a very common color blindness color for most people. So it's bound to result in issues for some people, as they will not notice that that's actually green. They'll think it's brown. Please note that the only color that's probably more common in color blindness than green would be blue. They have a simple example of a character sheet here and a quick overview of the game. Some basic rules, those and understandings of the concepts of the game system. They have setting overviews and roles and specialties. And then they have safety tools mentioned up here. This is largely a thing that is most common amongst non-TTRPG players. And is super new to the hobby people, as well as trouble cases at conventions or in stores or third-party places. For whatever strange reason, it's less common in tightly knit groups and experienced groups. Please note that they make a point of having a touchstone section here, referencing books, comics, films, and TV and video games. And then that's largely because they probably oriented it toward this product towards new people to TTRPGs, or people who have no experience in TTRPGs, just to give people a concept of what they're collecting here. There is a reference here for various TTRPGs and various individuals right here. It covers the core system right in this section right here. And yet again, it gives you another example reminder of what the character sheet is. Please note there is no weirdly bizarre choices that they did not include a character sheet in the back of the book, which is actually fairly anti anti-player, anti-consumer, because ideally you should have a complete character sheet in the back of the book, regular size, so people can just simply print it out, as opposed to having it on the website or having shrunk down versions of it in the book. So there you go. The basic structure is the classic dice pool system. Dice pool systems are largely favored by game designers that either are completely new to TTRPGs or have very little experience in the field. That's literally just because oftentimes in a dice pool system there is a defined success, mixed success, failure, extreme failure situation, and it's very easy to build a system around on having the die, just having it defined as a success failure for players and game masters. It's supposedly easier to balance. However, oftentimes the designers will add or create new systems or pull or remove systems from the system, modifying the dice pool concept, resulting in inconsistent difficulties overall in the system. So dice pool games typically have a very wonky balance, as it's a lot of interpretation by the game master in the moment to come up with a win with a mild failure, or a moderate failure with a mild success to it. And that kind of thing typically will burn out a lot of game masters over time, because they have to constantly be inventing stuff. Otherwise, they get into sort of a basic pattern where they kind of recycle the same thing over and over again. Which is why fumble rules, where your character throws their sword by accident or breaks their staff, are not typically very popular amongst many people, outside of the fact that sometimes you get really bored of a system and you really want to try something else new. It covers over the basic action rules in the book. Consequences, mixed success, miss, resistances, and so forth. And then goes over for the scar system and gear. Please note that in this book, they weirdly enough failed in this section to actually have a death mechanic. As far as scars are concerned, when your character maxes out scars, their character essentially goes in is a mystery state to be invented on the fly by the game master, or anything else like that. So once you max out your scars in one, either body, brain, or bleed scars, your game master basically has to, you retire or you die or something. There is no defined end state in it. It is suggested later on in the book that the player's character becomes a luminary, and they basically just roam around helping out people. Now here's a goofy little bit. Legacy of Harm in Horror section. This kind of thing is usually a thing that is, when people write about negative stereotypes in horror and stuff like that, or fears of your character going insane or something like that, that is usually entirely in the realm of people who are either A, not mentally or emotionally mature as individuals, so they're not fully developed, they're immature, so they have a really low tolerance for not winning the game every time, and or losing a small bit of power. And the second group of people that most commonly would have problems with a horror game, which is, interestingly enough, this is a horror game, so discouraging people from the psychological scary stuff in horror games, and you're playing a horror game, is kind of counterproductive. But the second group is largely people who are lacking in experience in horror games or in TTRPGs in general. The third category of people is the super crappy dungeon masters that do incredibly terrible things because they have no common sense, or players who do incredibly crappy things and they have no common sense. Incidentally, this section of the book has zero effect on all three of those groups. Zero effect. The first group, they're inexperienced. You predisposition them to the fear of some terrifying, horrible things happening, and then they become paranoid, and then they have issues prematurely in adventures. And once you get through it, it's okay, but they don't want to touch that TTRPG like Call of Cthulhu or Vessin or anything like that, because they are predisposed to thinking that horrifying things like graping and all kinds of things is going to happen automatically because it's a horror game. That is just terrible. And then the other group is like literally the terrible people category, where you can tell them not to do something and they will do that stupid thing. So it doesn't matter. So this is actually functionally a complete waste of paper in the book, because it's not going to positively affect groups 1 and 2. It's actually just going to ruin the experience for them. And group 3 doesn't give a crap, and they're just going to do it. So sooner or later, you're going to have to find out who group 3 is and kick them out of your games. Then we go into making a character section, which is kind of nice. Yet again, good artwork overall. You got different archetypes, such as the face, the muscle, and so forth. And there's 2 variants in there. There is hardly any differentiation between them. They're just beyond just a simple mechanic detail and a little bit of flavor. That's probably just because it's easier to balance the game overall. If it's all your quote-unquote classes are basically just flavor with exceedingly minor differentiations between them. And then you got determining action ratings and section and so forth for your character. How to build out your character and so forth. Now, there's this weird design fail in the book where it has like one section that gives you information on all the character classes, and then like part 1, and then there's part 2 where it has all the part 2 information for all the character classes, and then part 3 for all the character classes again, and part 4 all the character classes, and part 5 all the character classes. That results in a lot of times switching back and forth through the book. It's a small book, so it's not a big pain in the butt as if it was done like in, say, like a 300, 600, 400 page book. However, it's still annoying, and it's still a poor choice to design things like that. It's better to have like a universal section in here, or like a background, and then you have each class or role in their own set of pages, so you can go through all the information of that role or class, and then some equipment and stuff like that. And each class or role is separated out into their own thing in their own sections. Makes it easier for people to just read end to end without having to skip and trying to discover, hey, where's the next section of this role or class? And you just have to turn a few pages and you eventually find it somewhere. It's also handy just in case you need to find a rule in the game system. So you can always just, if it's a class or a role, you can turn back to that class or role and just read through the mechanics of that role. In this case, it's all broken up different sections, and you have a little bit of one role, and then a few more pages later, a few more bits of that role, and then a few more pages later, a few more bits of that role. And that's just counterproductive. Overall, I do have to say that the flavor of the text is quite good. My personal belief is that Spencer is predominantly a script writer by trade and so forth. So he shines best at his writing, and him and his team writing about flavor and character and stuff like that. But mechanically, there's a lot of weakness in his writing as well. So it's not structured as if it's like a manual or a guide to a system. It's written as if it's more like a setting or a world kind of thing, and it's just trying to convey the feelings and overall atmosphere of each mechanic and stuff like that. It's less mechanical and more flavor. This section is actually quite nice. It's called Creating Your Circle. By the way, Call of Cthulhu has this in the players and the game, the keeper's book as well. Basically, making your own organization. Some people have referenced this as a innovative concept. This has been done before in the past. Call of Cthulhu has done it. So there you go. You do have more structure though than say what Call of Cthulhu does in the circle concept though. So there is a slight touch more there, referencing out abilities of your circle and so forth. Basic rules on how to play the game as well. I do like the artwork a lot. They've done a good job of picking out good artwork and creating a feeling or an atmosphere to the book. As I said before, it predominantly feels like it's written by someone who is more experienced in writing scripts and teleplays and stuff like that, as opposed to mechanical writing. So there you go. There is several times in which in the book where it goes multiple pages where there is no artwork at all, and then all of a sudden all the artwork appears in a few pages. I do like the feel of the world. And there's some nice mixture of organizations, obvious artwork based on Spencer, the main designer of the system, and so forth. Some of the game master advice in here, largely he points towards a very linear structure in the game, oftentimes suggesting that the players will arrive at a location and they will acquire all the information and leave. And there's very little what if your players fail, what do you do then, and so forth. So there's still a bit of that predetermined scripting in understanding of design of world and adventure, that it just presumes that your players will succeed at things and it will continue on to the next thing. There are some nice bits of flavor and so forth overall. Now, it's important to note that there's been numerous times that it was pointed out that there's actually missing mechanics. As I said, there's no real death mechanic, and there's a lot of stuff that is just built up to a point, and then it's just like hanging with a question mark, like, oh, it's, you kind of just flavor it how you want it, kind of thing. And just so important, another system keep in mind, like Blades in the Dark or Vessin. This system is largely based on a lot of the concepts from, say, like Vessin and Blades in the Dark. Now, this is the core rulebook for Vessin. It's a notably bigger book overall, and it's actually an incredibly nice quality book in itself. So, it is basically roughly the same ratio of material or content through the books. So this one has basically the same kind of composition as this book. However, this is a little more world flavory in itself, and there's more mechanics in this system overall. It is rather weird at occasions where they omit adding exceedingly obvious mechanics, such as the death mechanic. which is a universal standard in all a universal aspect of all TTRPGs, is your character gets beaten. Your character has the potential to become so sufficiently injured that they die, and then they did not consider putting a death mechanic in for that. But this has it, and a whole bunch of other TTRPGs have. What happens if you hit 0 HP, or you have X many wounds, or something like that? Your character's dead. Now, it's also important to note that this system also requires like one set of dice, which is your standard dice, and you have another set of your dice that are golden or something differentiating them. That is called the gilded die, and the gilded die just seems to add just a few extra things to the system, and almost feels as if it's another need to buy another thing or have an extra set of items to play a game. It kind of veers towards a slight, not custom dice territory, but still requiring specific combinations of dice using colors to differentiate one set of dice from another, which is generally not super terrible. And it doesn't achieve the horrible status of custom dice where you have some arbitrary number or symbol system where you have to translate to an effect. But still, it's a little extra you had to put in. And not to mention, there's no actual complete character sheets in this book. There's just sections of character sheets in the book. So you end up having to go online, download those, or buy them in packets and so forth. Overall, this system is largely better as you're gathering ideas and remixing them into something else, as opposed to playing the system outright. A lot of people I have communicated with and talked about, I haven't had an opportunity to play this, because it's really hard to get 3 or 4 groups to switch away from Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, or Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition to try something else different. But anyways, I haven't played it, I haven't run it, but from what I've gathered from numerous reviews and conversations with people who have, that the system is, if you have a small group, it is brutally difficult. You end up in situations where your characters are kind of limited in what they can do, and it's largely up to the game master to, if you get into a conflict situation, like a fight, your characters are struggling to deal with things if they're in small groups. However, if you have a large group, say like Critical Role size large group, you can easily stack up your characters' abilities and actions together to basically be veering towards nearly unstoppable territory. Yet again, the system assumes in the Game Master section that your players arrive at this place and they end up getting all the clues and going on to the next place. So that's a knock against that. Overall, my general vibe of it is that it is basically a 2.75 score system, or 2.5. There is clearly issues with missing or not understanding the function of certain mechanics and rules in a TTRPG. The things you need to play a TTRPG or have a TTRPG be sufficient for a game master to run and players to play. It's weird that there is no there's no clear death mechanic outright in the system, as that would be a natural outcome from adventuring if your party is unsuccessful. So weird in that. Those Pesky Orcs has a death mechanic. You basically hit 0 and you're dead. Same thing with Vesson. It basically explains, and then some of the TTRPGs even say, hey, if you hit 0, you have X many rounds, or you have so many checks to do before you're dead. But Candela Obscura is like you hit your hit your scars number, and Game Master discover, oh yeah, you could have them retire and get promoted into a luminary. So there you go. This is like a 0.75 edition TTRPG. It's kind of in the realm of like advanced. Oops. It's in the territory of the original Dungeons and Dragons, except it's better written overall and better organized, but not by a whole lot. As there's still things about the original Dungeons and Dragons that's done better. Put Wolf link back up there. So this has a lot of issues in itself. This is like a 0.5 edition. That's like a 0.75 edition. It's basically a beta version of the system that is missing a bunch of stuff that needs to be addressed and fixed. And it would have been better if they used the pages just scolding players for being terrible people, for actual explaining some of the mechanics better, and filling in holes in the mechanics. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful weekend, a magnificent month, and see you next time. Ciao.